There's this very good book on linked data that was published in 2011, this book, in fact, and I'll link to it in the resources for this video. One of the recommendations that's made in this book is that you should reuse existing vocabularies whenever possible. And I like the way that they phrase this. Reuse of existing terms is highly desirable. And the reason for that, of course, is for interoperability. From the point of view of interoperability, that makes good sense. If you want to make your data interoperable with other data sets, you should use the same data structures, the same vocabularies those data sets are using, rather than making up your own unique and, let's be honest, possibly idiosyncratic vocabularies to describe things that someone else has already described. Now, the first vocabulary that's being recommended in this book on linked data is, you will notice, Dublin Core. Now remember that the original intent of Dublin Core was to be a core set of metadata elements for the web. And clearly, I think you could argue that it has achieved that, at least in this context, to be part of a core recommended set of metadata elements for describing, literally anything in the universe of linked data. Another vocabulary that's recommended here is friend of a friend. And I've mentioned friend of a friend before, so let's take a look at that specification. So friend of a friend, as you might expect, given the name, has a set of entities that describe people. You have agent and person, just like what we looked at in DBpedia, and in fact the DBpedia entities, agent and person, referred back to friend of a friend. You have things like name and knows and based near, which we've already looked at in the context of the RDF example from a previous video, projects and organizations that an individual might be working for or working on, and contact information and the like. So let's take a look at agent. The friend of a friend entity agent has a set of properties, including things like age and gender and Skype ID and blog address, etc. So you have a set of properties for agent that look fairly familiar, name and age and things that might apply to a person or any kind of an organization. And then things that may be a little bit more generic, like contact information. And agent has some subclasses, one of which is person. So let's take a look at person. Person, again, has a set of properties, including family name and first name and projects that they may be working on, and even Myers-Briggs, which is a type of personality test. Person is being declared as a subclass of agent and spatial thing. And there is this recommendation used with knows, which of course, if you think about it, makes quite a lot of sense, since the very name friend of a friend would seem to indicate that it's not just encoding characteristics of people, but relationships between people, who knows whom. Now, notice that friend of a friend declarations are simpler than DBpedia declarations. There are fewer properties. There are not as many connections with other ontologies. And part of the reason for that is that friend of a friend is basically a microformat. I mean, friend of a friend is not a microformat in the strict sense that it's created by the microformats group whose website we looked at in the previous unit, but you can think of friend of a friend as a microformat. It's a way of creating very small metadata records about a very specific type of thing in the world.